This conference will now be recorded.
This conference is now being recorded. Good morning, party people. Richard, I don't want to give you the impression that I, A, usually wear a jacket, or B, that this is in any way a structured webinar. We're all just hanging out, and I would hope, and I invite everyone on the call at some point to share a little nugget of knowledge from your disparate worlds. This isn't only about the topic of the day, but you know what I found, and this is just week 3, I'm finding that like I was really looking forward to this morning. Like my friends are getting on. We're having like a party line.
That sounds awfully
normal. I don't think Daniel knows what a party line is, but back in the day, there was like a 900. I was too young to do it, but there was a 900 number, and then people could just all call in and talk. Did anyone on this call ever call into a party line?
Way back in the day, before 900 numbers, rural people, like in rural Mississippi where I'm from, used to have to share a single phone line for multiple houses that were in the little area.
I'm really pleased your sentence ended that way, because I thought you were going to say in rural Mississippi we all had cans and we would shout into them. Michelle, shall I give you the screen? Or just look at Audrey Hepburn, 1965, the entire time?
Well, I don't really have anything to show at the moment.
Okay, then we have no screen, and we can just look at one another.
Okay.
Take it away. What are we going to cover today? And I know people have already written you with questions, so.
Yep. So my fun fact to share for today, and this is going to tie, well, first let me introduce my friend who is not Giles Johnson.
Oh, you're not supposed to say that on camera. Now you.
Now his cover is blown. This is my friend Richard Houlihan, who sat on the EU committees that formed EUDAMED. And Richard now owns EUDAMED.eu because he was smarter than the rest of the people on the committee and actually bought EUDAMED.eu and EUDAMED.com.
Oh, I thought you were going to say he was just the smartest one on the panel, but that was smart.
Yeah, that was a marketing wizardry right there.
Real win.
Anyhow, I invited Richard because, you know, in the last week or so, the EU delayed the implementation of EUDAMED, particularly just that little part of it for 2 years. So I thought Richard would be a great person to speak to that and what it means. And then also that we could clarify as a group that EUDAMED's just, it's a big part, but it's just one part of MDR, and people are getting confused that delaying EUDAMED means that the MDR is going to be delayed as well, and right now that's not the case. So Richard will be able to shed some light on those things for us, and then I also have a friend, Michael, that I think is going to be joining a little later. He's in Costa Rica right now, so he might be having some connectivity issues. So we'll see. But I also have a whole list of questions, so we'll entertain the questions for everybody's here, and then we'll get to the ones that people have emailed me that aren't here yet. So that's my
ask the first question.
So, well, my fun fact first is not only was EUDAMED delayed the past for 2 years, but also this week that the EC Commission delayed finalizing their medical device expert panels because they haven't had enough experts to apply. So they've extended their application deadline by 2 weeks because they don't have enough people to fill their expert panels, which are supposed to be the people that review the notified body's work for certain classes and certain types of devices.
Well, now I have 2 questions, because I suspect that there's going to be someone who listens to our call afterward where this is all foreign. So don't spend too much time on the basics, but maybe I'll ask Richard. EUDAMED is a body and MDR is a regulation. Is EUDAMED the body that created MDR?
No. EUDAMED is the European Medical Device Database. in
Okay.
short. It's the core, it's the central part of the legislation. I mean, all the regulations have to comply. You have to jump through all these hoops, but the data resulting from all the compliance, this is where the data has to be stored.
So
And within
may I say that it's
EUDAMED,
the European equivalent of the FDA database?
yes, but a lot bigger,
Okay.
substantially bigger. And one of the best parts about the whole thing is that it's going to be open to the public in the end. So that if you're going for a procedure, you'll be able to look up online what device they're going to putting into you. You'll be able to find all the history, all the versions, everything about that device on a public site. And all that is the data that the manufacturers and all the economic operators put in.
It doesn't seem like a huge demand right now. I don't think if I were having my gallbladder removed, I'd start looking up what tools are they going to use.
No, but this all steps back to the PIP case with the breast implants and the industrial silicone. So that if you were going for a procedure and you had various options, you could at least have a quick look and see if there's any issues. What are the incidents? What are the vigilance issues? How did the clinical investigation go? If we're at version 900 that's only 1 year old, why are we at that level of version? But at the moment, because there's nowhere for anybody to look for this information, that's why there isn't a market at the moment. But it will create a market.
All right. So EUDAMED was pushed back 2 years just means my availability as a patient to look stuff up is delayed 2 years?
Yes, from a patient perspective, from the industry perspective, there's a lot of things that they were expected to do with the data. There was a lot of data that they had to prepare and deliver to EUDAMED, and now it's in flux. Now it's kind of paused. But the problem is they're still going to have to prepare all this data. They're still going to have to be ready to submit it. And with the current specifications for the UDI device module, that's not going to change. We all know the data elements that are in there. So the waiting of the 2 years, that's only a gift. That's a gift from the Commission. The Commission have given the industry enough time now to prepare properly the way they all wanted to. And some companies are diving right in there, continuing with their projects. Some misguided companies are just going to sit back and wait. And this thing is huge. I cannot overestimate the size of this thing. I was actually the technical manager within running the teams and running the development of it. This is a major application from both the industry point of view and from the Commission point of view.
Did it need to be that big, or is it bloated for bloat's sake?
No. It's not for bloat's sake. I mean, the UDI device, that has something, I think it's 74 data elements, right? And that's not, in the database terms, that's not huge. But when you add to that all the vigilance data, and then you add to that all the clinical investigations and performance studies and the varying time slots that people have to answer the clinical investigations and the reports on that, it becomes huge. Each individual module of EUDAMED is a medium-sized project, but the whole beast together, massive. And then if you throw in the data exchange bit on top of that, which completely replicates every operation you can do through the front end, adding, editing, updating, you have to be able to do on a machine-to-machine basis. So that's where your data exchange comes in. So again, it doubles the size of everything. It will be good in the end. The industry have their doubts, but I think a long-term view on this is it will be good. And the Commission are looking at this on 15 to 20 year basis.
With my limited ability to retain information, and I can basically handle 3 things, you mentioned more than 3 things, and I began to tune out. My question is, why does it all have to be, here's the day and everything needs to be done? Why can't the vigilance part be, in March, and then the next part, do it in stages. That wouldn't seem as intimidating.
It is a ridiculous decision to have a big bang effect. From an IT perspective, from the industry perspective, it is awful. Because, first of all, people are going to have to save up all their data. So you're going to have 2 years of vigilance data from the planet, all waiting to be uploaded.
Start now if I wanted to?
No. What the commission are pointing to is there's what is it? Article 123. I kept a few notes for this just in case. Article 123 basically says that the whole system has to be fully functional. There is no reason why and they said there's legal reasons they can't, but there's also legal reasons they could actually change it so that each module could be fully functional. They can deliver it bit by bit. At the moment, the 2 modules that are complete are the actors and the devices. They're more or less complete, and they would have been there for March. I think it's an argument that I had while I was in there. I thought they should have put stuff live sooner. They said they'd no legal basis for it, but they're the ones that write the legal basis.
How many people were involved in this decision? How big is the commission? You were one of how many people?
On the IT side, we had about 23 people.
How many sides are there?
Business, this thing is like a Rubik's Cube.
Is it like 250 decision makers?
No, but there's a lot of different groups. You've got the commission, you've got the task forces, you've got the lawyers, you've got the industry, you've got the MDCG, which is all the member states. I think a lot of it is driven by the business unit within the commission. And the business unit, I think maybe there was 10, 12 people involved. And they were the ones that would have decided on the delay.
Were you the head of a group or part of a group? How did you fit in?
I headed up. Yeah, I headed up the development side. I headed up the development team and working with the business analysts, the coders, the nerds. I then interacted with the business. Oh, by the way, my background is IT as well, so I can call them nerds comfortably. I have 25 years in IT. I headed up the implementation, and I helped with some of the business unit meetings and the industry meetings to guide some of the directions. So I was on the implementation end, we shall say.
And how did you
that's where I've got all the knowledge.
How did it, what was the genesis? One day somebody said, let's create a database. That was decades ago, presumably.
Oh no, I'm 8 years involved with EUDAMED. EUDAMED 2 I came into in 2011. EUDAMED 2 was only accessible by the competent authorities, and they would get all the data from the notified bodies, from the manufacturers, and they would upload the basics of the data. The data in EUDAMED 2, abysmal, absolutely awful. It was full of duplicates. It was the worst way on the planet to design a database. But you had to live with what you had. So I stayed with that for several years, and then I pushed my way into the MDR EUDAMED, the EUDAMED 3 effectively. And yeah, I have a habit of taking ownership when I get in the door. And in this one, I had a lot of fun, which was the most stressful project I've ever been involved in.
And when did you formally leave your post?
April.
And why did you formally leave your post?
Oh, there's a question now.
And it's being recorded and shared globally.
Well, I had my eureka moment in 2012, where I figured out that the new legislation coming in was going to bring an abundance of consultancy. So then I went about positioning myself to get as much information as I possibly could to make my site full of consultancy.
You clever dog.
When I felt I had enough information, I thought, right, it's time to jump. And I jumped in expecting to do consultancy straight away, but a lot of the companies didn't understand what I was talking about. So then I ended up having to do training. So accidentally, I've ended up running these training courses around the place just to explain the whole EUDAMED, both technical and non-technical, to people. but it was around April time when I felt now's a
And when
good
did
time.
you become a cyber squatter?
2016.
That long?
And yeah. But the ridiculous thing is, I looked at the .com and .net domain names in 2012, and some German company owned them. I didn't even think about the .eu. And then in 2016, I decided, hey, I wonder if they're still available. And I went in, the .com, the .net, and the .eu were sitting there. $40. I mean,
No,
it's ridiculous.
there's some asshole out there who's squatting on joehage.com, and he has never done anything with it. And I'm like, they were
I
like,
made money.
I could buy joehage.com for $1,000, and I was like, there's no effing way. I just bought Joe Hage online, and Joe Hage can go to hell because Joe Hage online crushes Joe Hage searches.
I'll sell it to you for a modest price, Joe.
Yeah. I'll just misspell my last name. It'll be cool. I'll still win this. Okay. Well, thank you for that background.
You're
There's
talking
so
about
much more. Sorry?
You're talking about the searching on the web and stuff. Anytime anybody looks for EUDAMED now, I'm up on the first page.
Well, that's
brilliant.
because you have relevant content. The game is use the words that are needed, and are people linking into you? And you're obviously an authority. And Michelle's friend, and she brought you on in. Welcome.
Well, I do like Michelle now. She's a winner.
Who's not liking Michelle? Show of hands, who doesn't like Michelle on the call? No, well, he's taking a glass of water, and Elliot has issues with you. He's done his little diatribe.
Am I on mute?
You are not on mute. You're the woman of the hour now. What have you got to say for yourself?
Well, Richard, clarify a little bit why they delayed the 2 years, and first off, I want people to understand nothing changed except for the timeline. It's not that the requirements are going to get any less or any easier. It's just that you have what appears to be a more sensible time frame in which to implement them. But what the EU not ready? Is the database is not ready? Is the IT staffing? What is it that they finally kind of had this epiphany, like, May's like 8 months away or less.
I think it was less of an epiphany and just a fantastic excuse. And I'll explain that. When I left in April, we expected to be ready with actors' devices, certificates, and part of vigilance. Okay, so that was our planning. The clinical investigations and the post-market surveillance had already been pushed back. So we were looking at partial delivery. And then the move from DG Santé from DG Grow to DG Santé, it's like one directorate to another. The commission have transferred medical devices. And as soon as they did that, I was talking to some of the team and I said, you wait and see, they're going to use this for a delay. I thought 3 to 6 months. I never expected 2 years. For the clinical investigations, when we did our assessment at the high level requirements, it was something like 1,400 man days to create just that module. It's a huge piece of work. And that was at a high level. So there was going to be substantial days added to it. So the whole idea of picking 2022 and IVDR becomes applicable. I think it was just an arbitrary choice. Here, look, we've already got a date. Let's aim for that. Mm-hmm. Because to the best of my knowledge, there's no hard and fast decisions that were made or changes that were made. All the data elements are going to remain the same. It's just the implementations. But one of the issues that the Commission has in general with this is that the delivery date was in legislation. The delivery date was made by regulators who don't know anything about IT. So the actual regulations the business analysts and the technical analysts from the IT side, they have to break those down into components that are actually useful for converting it into a database, creating web screens, data exchange. So immediately they were on the back foot because it takes a lot of time for that. The only way you can set a proper IT delivery date is when you know your requirements. And the legislation was too loose for the requirements because you have task forces, you have lawyers, you have industry groups, and one guy says, well, we'll go this way with devices. And then the industry says, no, it won't work. And then the lawyers jump in and say, well, we should be doing something else. So the actual IT team, they've actually been working flat out for nearly 3 years. And all they're doing is changing things because the requirements were never hard and fast. So the delay is partially self-inflicted and also just, hey, we already have that date in the map, let's aim for that. But like you said, it's only the software that's delayed. The applicable dates for MDR, IVDR, all the other stages in there, they still apply. So everybody still has to be ready for March next year.
What would you say to companies who think that this is just an indication that the EU is not ready for MDR and that they're going to ultimately push the whole thing back?
They are mistaken. There's no other way of putting it. They are completely wrong. Because of the fallout of the PIP case, because of the money and the effort that has been put in to produce, the legislation took 6 years to get through all the stages and the trialogues and all the ducking and diving that goes along the way. This is done. The member states, 27 of them, they want this. And they, in some cases, they wanted more. There is no way anything else is going to be delayed. It's easy to delay a piece of software, but you can't delay anything that's associated with patient safety. And that's how they're viewing MDR. It's all about patient safety. So absolutely not. And if in the ridiculous event where they did delay MDR, which I really don't think is going to happen, I'll come back on and do some ridiculous dare just to go for it. You know.
Joe, that's your job, is to come up with something ridiculous for Richard to do. Should
MDR is delayed. No, absolutely not. That train is moving and it's not stopping.
You know, I want to get on my soapbox a little bit here. Every time that I post something on LinkedIn about the MDR being related to PIP and how regulations as a whole, and this happens in the US too, is that companies have enough rope in the regulation that they start out with some flexibility about how to do things. And then incidents happen that creates a patient safety incident in the public, then the public holds the government accountable for the way that they were regulating and overseeing the technology. So every time I mention PIP in relation to MDR, I get hate mail. It's fascinating, and Leslie can testify to this, but people are telling me I'm absolutely wrong. They're unrelated. MDR was already on the table. I'm like, yeah, but it's this perfect storm of events. They were talking about MDR. It wasn't a real thing yet. And then it happened, and then the whole EU Commission was being held accountable. It was the first time there was a massive public lawsuit in Europe, because Europe's not litigious like we are here in the United States. And even that notified body got sued. So, I mean, there's all these changing dynamics, and I think it's very presumptive to think that PIP is independent of the MDR.
Oh no, it's a huge part. When I was looking after, when I first took over EUDAMED 2, I'm sitting in the commission office in Ireland, and it was an old library. I'm a freelancer looking after a piece of software, and I'm watching the news that night, or one of the political programs in the evening, and they started talking about the PIP case, and I'm watching, and suddenly people start slagging off the commission and slagging off the database they have and saying that all the information they had was bad. And it was like a little penny dropped. I thought, oh, Jesus, they're talking about what I do. And it grew. It was a massive snowball, and it's all related. It was actually the main driver for pushing it along as quickly as it did come.
Yep. That's what I think. So does the peanut gallery have any questions for Richard about EUDAMED or the evolution of MDR? Or...
Say again what PIP is. Was that the breast implant thing, or was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's amazing because I think, Michelle, you had said that, I think in a conversation, like all these regulations are in response to some problem that happened. They don't come out of nowhere.
Right.
And I mean, I see that in other industries as well. I work a lot in aviation, and it's kind of like shutting the barn door after the cows got out or something. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. This is really terrifying and useful and interesting all at the same time.
So what are your thoughts on how MDR is going to help patient safety? Because like you said, all the 27 member states, you know, voted for this, and they're adamant about the deadline because to them, it is a patient safety issue. But to me, it's just more paperwork, and I've never seen paperwork ensure patient safety. I also think that what PIP did, I mean, they lied and they created fake paperwork. I mean, just flat out falsified test documentation, certifications, you know, you name it. And those things, you can't legislate integrity and character and morality. If you're already that kind of person that would go to the extent to violate the MDD to that point, to lie and create false paperwork, and now you have heaps and heaps more paperwork, you're just going to create more false paperwork if you're already of that character.
No, absolutely. And if you look at the authorized representatives, right? MDD authorized representative. It is a name. That's all it is. It doesn't mean anything. It's just they know somebody in Europe who's going to say that we represent. But under MDR, they've got legal obligations. There's penalties in there for the authorized representatives if they get it wrong. For the distributors, they're not actually part of EUDAMED, strangely enough, but the distributors, they also have to check and make sure that everything is correct with the imported devices and things. There's a lot of little things in there, but if someone is intent on cheating a system, there's always a way to cheat it. But they've tried to put in as many checks and balances along the way from the competent authorities, notified bodies. They all have increased responsibilities. The authorized representatives hugely increased responsibilities. So you'd hope that if there is somebody intent on doing it, that one of these will catch them. One of these gates will close. But there's always going to be someone. And like Mark was saying, and like you were saying, the legislation is always reactive. It's very rare that the legislation is proactive, because let's be honest, these people are not in the real world. They're in their own little governmental bubble, so they don't see what's going on a lot of the time until something happens. So,
and also,
fingers crossed, you got it right.
may I comment on that? And also, you don't need to underestimate the effect of unannounced audit, which is not only for the manufacturer, also to their suppliers and the suppliers of the suppliers. So it might happen that one Friday morning, when you don't expect it, someone turns up in your manufacturing site, and in parallel there's someone in the supplier side, and they phone each other. Does that match with what we have here, and so on? This is good from the surveillance point of view, but bad for the manufacturers when they only have a few possibilities to have suppliers and they refuse to sign the contracts to allow unannounced audits.
For the audience, that disembodied voice is that of Eckert Joxis. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but Eckert, Richard hasn't, I imagine, had the chance to talk with you before. Would you just tell him your background so he has perspective on where you're coming from?
Well, I have been working with the MDR in an analysis since 2016 or 17, I guess. In that time, I've been speaking a lot to someone from the Irish HPRA, which is the regulatory authority in Ireland. And I asked this guy, why on earth are regulations written in a language that is so unspecific? And he showed me the MDR, and in that time it was something like 370 pages or so. And I said, oh wow, they did some work, and I like that. I like clarity. I'm coming from the background of requirements engineering and quality management, and I like specific words, and that's why I like the framework. I'm very much open and think this is a good opportunity for the industry to have the MDR to clean up things.
And last week, Richard Eckert was our featured guest. And in a sentence or two, Eckert, how would you characterize the work that you've put together, that bit of software?
Well, as a very analytic person, I have somehow decomposed some regulations like ISO 13485 into single atomic requirements, and that creates the option and possibility to create digital traceability from the requirement to the implementation and design to the verification and validation later on. So this is the only way. I'm coming from the automotive industry, and it's a pleasure for me to apply the knowledge from there to the medical devices industry. So the traceability of requirements into the product, into the processes is basically necessary, and that's what I love to do, and this is one part of my presentation last week.
So I'm just putting this up so Richard can, and those who missed last week's call, clearly it's far more complex than the speed with which I'm flipping through these slides like that, or this. And Eckert, you're looking for folks to collaborate on and refine this to be version 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
So that's right. I changed this on him. Send me a message on Slack. So you're gonna have to join Slack to do that, Richard. But I'll get you his email if you're one of those Luddites who refuses to adapt to technology. Sorry, everybody who's listening and not on Slack yet. Okay.
Yeah, but to be honest, for me it's much easier to receive an email because I love to automate processes, and if every person sends me a personal message on Slack, I have to collect them by hand manually, and with email I just can collect them automatically and create user accounts automatically.
Well, without derailing.
I'm pretty sure there's a Zapier way you can automate that.
Yeah, there's a way to do it on Slack as well, but okay, Eckert, I'll get your email and I'll adjust it for everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So if we could pause that for the moment, I see that my friend Michael is on now. Michael was my kind of other guest for the day. Michael owns Regulatory Globe, and he has, in the past few months, he has several MDR transition tools, but he created the father of all transition tools with an MDR to MDD comparison table that you can automatically drop down, select things that are and are not applicable to you, and then fully map out where the correlations are, and as a result, where the gaps are. And I think it's going to be a really powerful tool, especially for people who are still in the grief stage of denial that MDR is still coming. So Michael, do you want to give us a brief introduction and tell us a little bit about your tool and your project, and then I'll go through the questions I got on Slack last night, and then me, you, and Michael can take turns chiming in.
Yes.
Hello,
There he
everybody.
goes.
Hope
Hi,
you guys
Michael.
can hear me.
Yes, just barely though. Do talk up.
Okay, great. So I currently in Costa Rica, so my connection is maybe not that good. So yeah, so that's true. I already have created several different tools which should help to find all the gaps according to the MDR. And this is a Excel-based tool which should help you to go all through all the processes and all your devices you have, and to figure out where your gaps are in the end. So it's really simple. It's Excel-based. There are no special things on it. So you have to go through all the requirements from the MDR and decide if it's a gap for your company or not.
And I like it because it's very visual. It kind of immediately creates a little bit of a dashboard, so you can tell, right out of the gate what size project that you're going on, and you can decide if you need to, tackle the low-hanging fruit where there are some correlations so you can get some big wins, or if you need to go after the thing where there are no correlations and they're truly brand new elements.
If I may quickly.
Yep.
First, Michael, I love the foreign sounding bird that you've brought to the call. That's fantastic. But second, is there any way that either Michelle or you or I can access the database in some way so I can put it on the screen as you speak? So people can kind of visualize what you've got? Do you have anything, Michelle, on that where you could show it?
Michelle, something which you can show right now?
I would have to.
Because
I know Monir is going to join us a little bit. He had to pick up his kids. So Monir may have something to show, yes?
I just need to put my finger on it. I don't have it.
Okay. Well, when you do, let me know and I'll give you controls of the.
Okay. So I met Michael because I was on a tangent, again, back to people who send me hate mail. I was adamant that that there was a correlation between MDD and MDR, and all the consultants I saw were giving the advice to people like, just forget it, just start all over with the MDR. It's a brand new thing. And I'm like, well, the MDD didn't go away. They didn't take anything out of the MDD. They added above and beyond to the MDD. So I was just on this kick where I was going to either create a tool myself or just look for what was out there. And that's when I found Michael's tool. And Michael's tool, proves exactly what I said. Not only is there a significant correlation between the MDD and the MDR, but as you start reading the MDR, and even for the things that are technically new that might not have been addressed directly in the MDD, they were in, a dozen or so MDev guidance documents, which were supposedly voluntary, that people have been following for years because the notified bodies made us. And so even the new things in MDR, some of them aren't really new. If you weren't already doing them, you weren't going to get a notified body to issue a quality management system certificate or a CE mark certificate. So maybe while I'm looking for that, maybe Michael and Richard can comment on what they think about.
I have one comment, and the main thing is the MDCG decided that the legacy devices, the MDD devices, were still going into EUDAMED. The commission didn't want them in EUDAMED. We fought against it, and everybody wanted to say no because we were using the UDI as the key for the system. But MDCG decided if there's a vigilance issue, a legacy device has to be inside an EUDAMED before you can enter your vigilance documents, your MIR form, the FSCA and stuff like that. Now, even with the delay, that only brings you to 22. The MDD devices, a lot of them are still going to be certified until 24. So the MDD devices, some of them will still have to be entered into EUDAMED. So then Michael's tool is still hugely valid because they're still going to know exactly what they're going to need to know exactly which pieces they have. End of comment.
Okay, I found it.
Okay, I'll give you the screen. Oops. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here we go. Thank you.
So I totally agree with that. So the tool helps to see the comparison and the similarity between the MDD and the MDR, but this does not mean that you shouldn't start from the scratch. It should just be a helpful guide where you can see where the similarities are. So, but
Right.
mostly it's the best or the easiest way to start more or less from scratch. But it's up to each company how they want to implement that. But this
Right.
tool here should easily show them where are the similarities from the current MDD to the new MDR.
Yep.
Okay.
I love it because it really helps you prioritize your resources and see where you need to start depending on your plan of attack. Like you could start with all the correlations and right off the bat, you can see, okay, we have got this much, that we're starting with this many similarities. And it's very helpful because it's got the text from the MDD, it's got the text from the MDR, and then in between, Michael and his team have done a lot of significant legwork to do some interpretation about the bridge from the MDD to the MDR where there are similarities. And you can see right here, and this sample that I have is just for chapter 1, scope and definitions. And so right off the bat, you can see where the underpinnings are the same or similar. And then you can start by going through your quality management system where there is a correlation and then augmenting it. Or vice versa, you know, to me, that would be like getting the quick wins to show management that you're getting traction and making progress on your transition. And then, or if you wanted to do like, okay, this is really truly a brand new thing. What have I done here, Michael? I'm trying to get my drop down back. Or alternatively, if you wanted to start in where, you know, there might be a true gap where you might not have anything in your quality system or your technical documentation at all, you could go through and look at where there's no correlation and start creating things where they might not exist. So then you can also go through and let's go back to all here. Then you can start going through, is this applicable to your business or not? Is it required for your company? For example, if you don't make implantable devices or you're not a notified body or a number of other things, you can automatically exclude some elements of the MDR. And again, that's going to kind of just give you a temperature as far as how much work do you have to do. So I think that's probably enough for now. I want to give Michael an opportunity to come back as a guest later and we kind of workshop this with maybe a more technical example. So Joe, if you could turn my screen off. Stop. Okay. So what do you guys think of the tool, and do you have any questions for Michael?
when you and I spoke about it, I was an immediate advocate of it, recognizing, of course, this is not my discipline, but it did seem to clearly identify the gaps. And as a somewhat linear thinker, I frankly don't know how I would approach the transition without understanding what's missing.
Mm.
So, I mean, do you or Richard or Michael have experience, or someone on the call have experience with helping someone in a project like this without a roadmap like that? And if so, how did that go? It seems like a no-brainer to me. Anyone else feedback?
I can just say, observing my company from the outside, people are panicked and they're spending many, many hours, trying to figure this out manually and creating pages and pages of documents. And it's kind of like in the dark. It's like hope is not a strategy, but we hope we haven't missed anything, So I have two questions. When is this tool available, and how are you going to monetize this, or how much is it going to cost, and how do we get it?
Mark is saying, here's my open wallet. I need that right now.
Yeah.
Who do I send the check
Here,
to?
take my money, please. Money is no object.
That's right. So what is the process? Is there a link where we could just go and get it, or what?
Yes, the tool is already available on our website. It's regulatoryglobe.com, and there is a shop system where the tools are available.
I'm pulling that up now, and I'll share my screen once I get there.
And how much is it, Michael? About 15, 16 Swiss francs?
The MDD versus MDR tool is 1,090 Swiss francs. That's approximately $1,120.
Where do I go for that?
Yeah, you have the blue buttons, the shop system. And then you have on the left side, you have the MDR product category, MDR on the left side. The white, no, that's the normal MDR. On the left side, go up a little bit, product categories, EUDAMED, ISO, MDSAP, yes, MDR. And then scroll down.
This one?
The MDR versus MDR, yes, right. So there you will also have other additional information if you click on that.
Do I need this one or this one? Gap assessment including ISO?
No, the MDD versus MDR gap assessment.
The 1,090?
Yes, yeah, that's the Swiss francs. But if you click directly on the picture, yes. So then you can download their test version. That's what Michel already showed. That you can play with this tool and figure out if it's fit for your work or not, if you're happy with that. So then you get an email where you can download the Excel spreadsheet. Here we go, yeah.
Okay, wow, all right.
That looks not.
Okay.
Here we go. So
Clearly
that's just
small for anybody to read, but
yeah, that's just the test version. There's just chapter 1 included, and the original, so the full version has all the chapters and annexes in it.
So the complete version of this is 1,090 CHF.
Yeah, that's Swiss francs. That's approximately $1,120 US or something like that.
Okay. Well, as you've heard here, a bargain at twice the price.
No, that is really pretty amazing. Thank you.
I'll put the link in the GoToMeeting so everyone can easily get there.
Perfect, thank you.
No?
And another benefit I see here is in that tool is that Michael put, and I know it's a lot of effort, put effort into making it possible to collapse and explode, no, not explode, the chapters, so it's easier to read. You don't have to read through all those, I don't know how many items you have, but you on the left side you can have groups. You have groups of parts of the regulation, and that makes reading it also much easier than before.
I love
Michael,
that.
what am I missing here? That this $300 Swiss franc difference, including ISO 1345. How do I feel like I'm missing something if I don't get the full thing. What am I missing? These are too similarly named, your marketer advised. I don't really clearly see which one I would need, only because you told me and I'm on the phone with you.
Yes, so it depends on the company what they really want to have. Some companies want to start from the scratch and would like to have also the connection to the ISO. Other want to see the comparisons between the MDD and MDR. So that's based on the requests we got from different customers, and also based on that we have developed these different tools. So that's in the end why we have this several. So we have the MDR gap assessment, a single tool, then with the ISO, and then also with the MDD. So
I could only hazard to guess how long it took you to assemble this.
yeah, just for the normal MDR gap assessment, we took over 600 hours. And then additionally to the MDD versus MDR, we have additional 400 hours, so approximately 1,000 hours in the end.
As your self-appointed marketer, you might want to say, you can pay us 1,000 Swiss francs, or you can spend 1,000 hours. So we're asking you for a Swiss franc an hour for our time here. And that might put in perspective that this is underpriced. But I'll leave that for you to decide, and you know where to find me if you want to talk more. Michelle, I know that you told me you had at least a half dozen questions that were written in for you. Presumably those weren't hate mail, but love mail?
Yes, those were love mail.
Okay, have at it.
So one of the interesting ones, and I know Richard and I have talked about this in the past, and I'm curious to see what he has to chime in here, and Michael as well. Let me go through here. And it's about the language that the standards and regulations are written in, and I think Eckhart even made a comment to this effect as well. Let me see. Oh, for instance, if one disagrees right now, for instance, we found a tiny discrepancy. So this person has had a discussion with their notified body where they're having conversations around a 60601-1 test standard, and they have a difference of opinion in how to interpret it. And so this company, you know, there's an English version and a French version of this particular standard, and the company, you know, was like going with the French version, and they were explaining it to the notified body, you know, in English, and it meant something different to the notified body the way that they had said it in French versus English, and it made a significant enough difference in what their documentation needed to look like. And so he said the notified body refused to accept the French interpretation, saying English is our language of use. What's the legal binding of different translations, and is shopping around allowed? And you know, Richard and I have talked about this because the regulations are written in English, and almost nobody on these committees is a native English speaker. So they're writing regulations in a second, maybe third language, and they don't understand the words that they're choosing and what they imply in English versus what they imply in their native languages. So that was one of the questions that I thought was particularly interesting. So Richard and Michael, if you guys want to chime in there on what your experience has been.
Michael, I'll let you go first.
So yeah, I'm not really, I don't know, I can't really give you here an advice or something like that. So because I'm also not really, my mother language is also not English. So, but what I have seen is really the problem. If you read the English version and also some German version, then you also see there some gaps between. So. Yeah, so that's definitely a problem that a lot of people write something in English which is not the mother language, and that make a huge confusion, or makes not really exact. If you read something, then sometimes it's not really clear what they really want to say, and that makes really hard to understand everything in the right way. So yeah.
One of the stories that I told Michelle was that in one of the meetings that I went to, I can't remember which module we were on, I think it was certificates, and the participants were discussing the business rules. There was an Italian lady, a Spanish lady, a Belgian guy, and a Greek guy, and they were all arguing over the English sentences, and they all kept moving words around so it suited their understanding of English. And myself and another native speaker, we're sitting at the back waiting for our part of the meeting to start. Every time they moved something, it meant something completely different. And this is the English then that gets translated to the different languages. So I completely understand the French argument, the notified bodies, there's a lot of non-native English speakers putting these things together, and the translations will create another level of confusion. To be honest, it's, yeah.
I have two examples there. I saw Basil Akra from TUV speak one time about what it was like going through their designation audit with the competent authorities. And they said that the competent authorities were getting in arguments amongst themselves during the audit because they didn't agree on the interpretation of the regulation. So if the competent authorities don't agree about how it's supposed to be interpreted and are not consistent, what is that going to mean for the notified bodies that are getting designated, and then in turn the industry that has to go through this process once the notified bodies have? I mean, it's going to be a level of chaos still.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned there in your question was about shopping around, and one of the problems that has come up under the MDD legislation was the fact that when people were looking for certifications, they could shop around. And I remember sitting with the auditors in Ireland that would go out and audit the various bodies, and the guy explained to me that they had found certain evidence that for certain devices you were better off to go to, we say, a notified body in one country over another. And the shopping around is also something that's been taken care of in the legislation. So you're limited in how much you can shop around.
So I think I'm going to add this piece of advice to my conglomeration of things that I've been telling people over and over, and that's, if you do not have a notified body yet and you're about to select one, you need to give a strong consideration to the native language or the language that they operate in on a day-to-day basis, because you are going to have conversations over interpretation and whatnot. So you need to be able to have those conversations in the language that you are both comfortable.
And you also need to be careful of your authorized representative, because when you select an authorized representative as a non-EU country, that limits the competent authorities that you're going to be associated with. You can't pick a Dutch authorized representative and go to the Irish competent authority. Whichever country the authorized representative is, that's the country that your competent authority is going to be in.
Interesting. I had not realized
Fun
that.
fact for the day.
Yep, fun fact for the day. There you have it. So, with that,
This might be a suitable time for me to show your little video here.
Yeah.
You can narrate if you like.
Yeah, so I came up with these, again, when people were in denial and notified bodies were starting to drop like flies, I came up with this flow chart that you needed to interview your existing notified body or your new non-notified body to determine if they were going to still be in business or still be able to support your products. And this last one was probably the most controversial about how many employees has your notified body hired. And if it's been less than 20% year over year for the last 3 years, they're not going to have the bandwidth to keep up with certifying your products in time for the MDR. And that last one's still a very real challenge. Even companies like PSI.
Or the notified body?
Do what?
Did I see Tinder up there on the notified body selection?
It's like, do you need to swipe right or left on your notified body?
So to be clear, you're not saying that Tinder is a notified body.
Yeah. Although right now it's got a good shot as anything else.
That's right. You could say that it has at least as much qualifications as 3 dozen notified bodies.
There you go.
Yeah.
Let me give a shout out to Lucia, my video production manager, assistant director. She made this. She's excellent. So if anyone has any videos, and I've said this before, and God bless present company, not always the most stimulating material can even be made to look, engaging, and people want to watch this kind of stuff. So there's my little marketing tidbit. Check. Then Joe, stop talking.
Okay. So I got lots more questions, but I think we'll save them for the other session. Hopefully Luke will be able to attend that one since they're his questions. So I think that's a good place to wrap up.
I have one selfish question on EUDAMED. It's this database of all the devices. Is there anything in there about SOUP or software bill of materials of third-party libraries that could help in a cybersecurity context?
Not that I can remember.
Okay.
I think there's one question, and again, I'm open to correction. I can find out, but I think there might have been one question about, is it a piece of software? And that was it.
Okay.
But there was nothing specific into the cybersecurity side. And in fairness, the cybersecurity side is also a side of the whole industry that people have dropped the ball on. That's massive.
So Daniel, are you hoping to complicate EUDAMED even further with your ideas on cybersecurity?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Can we do that in phase 2 in the year 2030, or?
Maybe. I mean, if you have a database with all this information, including the cybersecurity information, so that when there's an active threat, it can very quickly be looked up, is a huge win from the cybersecurity side. Because this is something that happens in seconds. There's a new vulnerability, and within minutes it's been exploited. So you need that fast lookup. It's not something that can take weeks going from manufacturer to manufacturer. So anytime we can leverage some infrastructure that's already in place like that, I think you'll see EUDAMED grow in that direction if in the coming years.
Between Daniel and Richard, I wonder, what is the doomsday scenario of EUDAMED being live and getting hacked?
The infrastructure that's been put in place for EUDAMED, it is a real lockdown black box. A normal database, the developers get to go in. They'd lock them off a bit, but there's always someone who finds a way to get into it. The entire infrastructure, and there was quite a lot of security preparation went into the actual infrastructure of it. It is tight. It is locked down. There was like 3 people out of the entire team who had key fobs that could actually access the systems.
I almost feel like you're throwing down the gauntlet here and saying, go on, Daniel, do your damnedest, try to break into this.
I saw companies in the past that said, hey, we're unhackable, nobody can get into us, and they get
Never say
destroyed.
that.
Yeah.
Never say that.
Everything is hackable.
Most probably those companies are the first ones to get hacked because they have no awareness about what they are doing.
Yeah. It's all about awareness of the whole cybersecurity industry. It is trying to make people more aware. My daughter's studying IT at the moment in Eindhoven. She's just in the middle of her second, the defensive cybersecurity side. And yeah, the cybersecurity is an industry that's just going to grow and grow. And if I was getting a heart implant, we'll just take a pacemaker and they can connect via Wi-Fi to a pacemaker to test it. I would really want that tied down. I would really want that as secure as humanly possible. At the moment, a lot of these things don't have anything, which is terrifying.
I have to say that, and I'm just about for the last 5 to 7 years, every time the topic of cybersecurity comes up, no offense to present company, there doesn't seem to be a lot of energy in my conversations with manufacturers or industry players. I get kind of a sense of, yeah, I know. And I also get, and everyone to a person would say, no, I understand if it really got hacked, it'd really be, but I think a lot of, because the industry is, of course, made up of human beings, just like you and me. And we personally just had a HIPAA violation happen with some small operation my son had, and the hospital sent the data, and this is ridiculous, to the home of a babysitter we've not used in 8 years, and we don't even think she lives there anymore. How this happened, we have no idea. And that's not a cybersecurity thing, but we talked to some counsel and they said, no, this is a big deal. It's a HIPAA violation. And Beth is like, what's going to loom over Zachary's shoulder with his, I don't know. And I hardly think that this is a doomsday thing, but I know oftentimes I've been like, look, I'm sure it would take Daniel about 5 minutes, if that, to divine my social security number, because he knows where to look and who's collected that data and blah, blah, blah. So here I am saving every, making sure I'm encrypted and this and that, when who am I kidding? One quick anecdote, which still makes me laugh. When Beth and I were first dating, she's a beach person and I'm a city person. So my vacation coming up in February is going to London and Paris, and we're bringing the kids. That's a Joey vacation. A Beth vacation is going snorkeling or putting me in some situation where my stomach is queasy. Anyhow, we were on our way to, I think our first trip was Jamaica when we were dating, which I wouldn't recommend. That was like one of the worst trips we took. A lot of
the date kind of thing. Jamaica you wouldn't recommend?
I wouldn't recommend Jamaica relative to the many other places I visited. Anyhow, what I do is I used to bring a mound of papers, like newspapers, dating myself, that I hadn't read. And I would be encouraged, I'd be motivated to get rid of this paper. So I would read it as fast as I could so I could leave it in places. We were on the plane and I finished a Wall Street Journal and she saw me rip off the corner that had my address on it. And she said, why are you doing that? And I said, I don't know, my dad always rips off the corner of his Newsweeks before he throws them away or something. And in one of the wittiest things she said, she's like, are you afraid someone's going to send you a postcard? Anyhow, that was cybersecurity back in the 90s with me ripping off my, a lot of people think it's not going to happen to me. I'm too small. What would be the point? And I know this is our topic 2 weeks from now, and I'll probably bring up a similar story. But should EUDAMED be concerned, Daniel? Or, Richard's a big muckety muck, and he was the head of the thing, and he's IT, and he knows this and that, and he feels pretty good. He didn't say unhackable, but he feels pretty good. What do you say to that?
So it's going to be a public database, right, with public read access at least.
Separate instances. Okay.
So as long as it's well distributed enough, I think denial of service is probably the biggest threat against it. If for whatever reason it can't be accessed, that could lead to delay of business activities. I don't think there's any widespread, like there's nothing, I'm trying to think of some vulnerability that someone could exploit that could lead to something widespread to happen. I don't think that's really an issue here. The only issue would be, on the corporate side of someone, let's say, wanted to change the records post facto. Are there forensically secure logs and archives kept so that if it has been changed? And as long as that's in place and it's kept separate, then even if someone were to get in and change their records, you could always go back to those forensically secure archives and say, no, it has been changed, or no, we're reasonably sure within the age of the universe that it hasn't been changed.
Everything is hackable.
Everything's hackable, of course. Just come to DEF CON.
Actually, on a bigger thing with the medical devices, if you were talking about the doomsday scenario, Joe. If somebody hacked a specific device, a specific vulnerability, for a terrorist attack, if you could attack pacemakers as a terrorist, how terrifying would that be? That's a vulnerability. And that is that type of thing is a doomsday vulnerability. So I don't think enough attention is given to cybersecurity, to be honest. And a lot of the companies who turn around and say, it's okay, we'll be grand. Everybody's grand until it goes horribly wrong, and then suddenly they're reactive and it's too late. So I really think that more attention should be paid to some of these things, and not just by the nerds of the world.
Alan Cooper just sent me this link. Medtronic and the FDA left an insulin pump with potentially deadly vulnerability on the market until researchers who found the flaw showed how bad it could be.
Wow. See, that's scary.
Again, in my immortal self says, yeah, but I mean, really, who's going to hack Joe Hage's pacemaker? You want to hack a pacemaker, go get, what was his name? Dick, I don't know how this is.
Dick Cheney, yeah.
Thank you, Dick Cheney. Don't mess with me.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If you're at a big conference, a couple of thousand people, if someone has found a vulnerability and they, via Wi-Fi, just attack everybody's pacemaker, then it's not just Joe's pacemaker that's gone, it's everybody in the room.
I'm still like, how likely is that?
There's so many questions you can ask. How likely is that? How likely is the PIP?
It's like, I could die every time I get in my car too, but I don't think twice about getting in it. It's like, I'm not going to not get a pacemaker because the only pacemakers on the market are hackable.
Well, it's like the black swan idea, which is, you got to look out for those things that are highly unlikely, because that's what's going to come and bite you in the,
Yeah.
So that's kind of another side, not to continue derailing the conversation. I'm
No,
sorry.
it's fine. This is how these conversations go. This is a free-flowing That's what makes these so fun to me.
But Jay Radcliffe, who was one of the first researchers to find a medical device vulnerability and publish it and go through the coordinated disclosure process with the manufacturer, found it in his own insulin pump. He was hacking his own insulin pump. He was interested in how it would work. And there was a big hubbub when he released his work, people saying, should I take my child's insulin pump off? So he starts every single talk he gives with, I want to let you know, I'm being him, that I'm a diabetic. I still use the pump even though it's vulnerable. I've done what I can to make it safe, but the chance of me dying from not having insulin is much higher than me dying from it getting hacked. So do what you can, but don't overreact and refuse care that you need.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel, I look forward to your talk, and I'm curious to see what your thoughts are going to be on some of the recent FDA trends in cybersecurity, because I think that they published a top 10 or top 12 list or something of that nature recently. So if you could check into that before you're up next, I'd love to hear about that.
Daniel, how intrigued are you?
I'm curious, from your perspective as a technical expert, is the FDA on point, or are they late to the party, or is it even a thing that the things that they're worried about in cybersecurity?
They've done a lot of work, and there's a lot more work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can I leave you all with the thought for the day? Do you all know who Michael Malice is? He's got a podcast. He's a Russian. He's an author. He writes about North Korea and about the new right and stuff. And he said, I recommend you take a red pill, but not the whole bottle, if that makes any sense to you.
A little, yeah.
So Michael Malice, you should follow him. He makes incredible videos on YouTube, and he's a very smart.
Write that down. Take a red pill, but not the whole bottle.
Yeah,
that's a good
I
metaphor.
start putting that on my feed.
Yeah, yeah. He's just a very clever, witty, very young, brilliant guy who lives in New York and was born in the Soviet Union, and he's an anarchist.
Okay.
Oh man.
If the group would like, we can, that's the thing about these calls, because they don't really have a defined endpoint. I don't typically say, okay, we're out of time, see you all next week. But I just try to measure the energy in the room, and I think we're thinking, I think we had a nice call, let's go back to our days. If someone has anything they want to contribute, this is the time to do it. I'd like to formalize this part a bit, though. If you guys like the idea, that is, where we conclude each call or start each call or take a break in each call, and everyone takes a minute and shares one little factoid or nugget that, I could give a marketing tip, and Daniel could say, look for SSL, or don't put in your social security number, or whatever. Everyone goes and gives one little factoid. Is that, just in general, let me ask, take your temperature, does that interest you all?
I thought that's how we started the call.
No, I mean, Alan hasn't turned on his recorder, his microphone at all once. He just sits there smiling back at us. And still he doesn't take this bait to put on his microphone.
Hey, Alan.
He has a very, very high-pitched voice. It's embarrassing, which is why he's so shy.
Hey, Joe.
Okay, that's better. Would anyone like to throw out? I think I've already done my share of marketing advice today. All right.
Update Chrome. Make sure your Chrome is updated. There's a new vulnerability in the wild. It happens automatically, but double check you're on the latest version.
How do you do that?
So you go to the little dot, dot, dot in the upper right-hand corner, click on Help, and then About Google Chrome, and
Hold
then...
on. I'll do it. I'll be here. I have to do it anyhow, based on what you said. Okay, dot, dot, dot.
Mm-hmm. And then go to Help. Second to the last. Yep, About Google Chrome. And it'll check for an update there. And if you need one, it'll let you know. Usually this kind of happens in the background. No, and it's updating. See, we're on the latest. So you were vulnerable. It's been seen in the wild. So this is not just theoretical.
Do I have to keep this open while it's doing it?
I don't believe so. I think as long as Chrome is open, it'll update.
And what need to relaunch to finish updating?
There you go.
Do you have a sense of what the vulnerability was or how vulnerable I was a moment ago?
From what I understand, it was in the audio processing module. It was a remote code execution, a possible remote code execution vulnerability. So pretty bad, even though Chrome is well sandboxed. So basically, go to a web page and someone could install malware on your computer.
And nobody likes that.
Nope.
Okay.
So I see Luke finally joined. I don't know when he joined, but I hope it was in time to hear the question. But I saved most of your questions, Luke, for another interview with me so that you would have the benefit of hearing the discussion.
Luke, do you have a microphone and or webcam so we could say hi for the first time? I've not had a chance to meet you in person or virtually person. So Richard, this call is I think a weekly microcosm of what 10x is. This new community to me feels like 10x every day, which is a delight. The event is more so for us to get out of our chairs and share a meal and commune than it is any kind of groundbreaking, couldn't have found on the internet topic. It's just us getting together and having a good time. So if you can make February 17th, that's a one-day thing in London, I'd love to include you. You obviously have a lot to contribute to the.
I'll need to check because I have a funny feeling that I'm doing a training session somewhere that day.
But conveniently, you can reschedule that. So
I shall tell you in 2 seconds.
I can't reschedule because it's the one day my wife gave me off from vacation.
On paper, at the moment, I will be in Naples on the 18th.
Yeah, that's the day after. I'll be in Paris on the 18th.
So it depends on my wife because we're doing a training session in Tübingen in Germany, and we thought, right, we're going to do one the following week in Naples. So we're actually going to take the train up into Switzerland and drop down through Italy. So if I tell her I'm taking some time out to go visit some people for a beer in London, I'm not sure how she will take it.
Well, let her go her own way and you'll meet up with her and
I can buy her a one-way ticket.
That's all. You know, or she just comes to the thing. I serve ice cream. Does she? Unless she's lactose intolerant, like Alan here.
Okay.
Anyhow, yeah, that was Michelle mothering us all into saying, all right, Joe, wrap it up. We're all adults and we have to go back to work, which concludes today's call. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
See you online. And Richard, join this Slack community so we can just chat one another, all right?
Okay, I will do. I will do.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.
Thank you very much.
I think Michael was going to stay on to talk to me.
Michael, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, I'll pause the recording and let you guys talk.